The parasha of this morning is called Parasha Toldot. Toldot is the name of the parasha of this morning, and it means generations. It depends on how you interpret it. Some interpret it as the consequences, but we are going to call it generations today. That is what the Torah calls it. So the parasha of this morning is called Toldot. Parasha Toldot, which means generation or consequences, witnesses the birth of a conflict which is still relevant today. The twins that were born to Isaac and Rivka, Yaakov, which is Israel, and Esau, which is Edom, or Rome, or Christianity, represent two regimes that were still diametrically opposed to each other. They fought in the womb of their mothers, and the battle is still raging. The battle is not only a physical one, but also a spiritual one. The battle lines are drawn far beyond the physical domain and in the metaphysical domain in the eighth sphere. Parashat Toldot also relayed the hardship of Isaac in establishing his right to settle in the land, and the jealousy and hatred of Abimelech, the Philistine. Despite all this hardship, we learn of Jacob's success and of his amassing great wealth against all odds. We see that in this parasha, Esau lost his birthright by selling his birthright to Jacob, the second born, or the younger one. So the parasha means the generation of Isaac, the son of Abraham. The generation, the Toldot of Isaac ben Abraham. So we can see here that this parasha is the one that is going to do what? Is going to include the entire heroes of our forefathers. Now we have Abraham, we have Isaac, and now finally Jacob is born. At the first one emerged, Rudy. He was completely like a coat of hair, and they named him Esau. That is what the Bereshit chapter 25 verse 25 said. Every parasha is important in his own right, and so much happened that will impart the rest of history. But it is in this week parasha that the dice is cast for millennium to follow, until the arrival of Messiah. Finally, all the main characters of world history have been born. In many respects, the Torah account of Isaac's family read like a replay of Abraham's. Many years of childlessness are followed by the birth of two sons. The elder one rejected and the younger one accepted. Isaac favored the elder one, which is Esau, much as Abraham is sympathetic towards his elder son Ishmael. While Rebekah, like Sarah, persevered in her effort to ensure that the accepted son, is recognized as the true heir to Abraham and the sole progenitor of the great nation which God promised to establish from his seed. We can see that the picture of Isaac's life is like a mirror picture of that of his father, Abraham. First of all, Sarah was barren. The same thing, Rivka was barren. Right? Sarah gave birth to Isaac. In this case, Rivka gave birth to two sons, Esau and Jacob. So, and we can see also that Rivka made sure that the younger one, which is Jacob, continue the lineage, the heir to the throne of Abraham. So, just like Hagar has a son, but Sarah makes sure that the younger son, which is Isaac, continue the work, because Isaac was the promised son to continue the lineage of Abraham, his father. This is, however, there is, however, a significant difference between the two sets of brothers. So let's see the differences between these two sets of brothers. Ishmael and Isaac were born of two different mothers. Ishmael was the son of Hagar, an Egyptian, who still attached to her pagan way, while Isaac was the son of the righteous Sarah. Furthermore, Ishmael was born when Abraham was still Abram and still uncircumcised, and can be said to belong to his father's imperfect past. Abraham was born into a family of idolaters and is even described as having himself worshipped idols in his youth, while Isaac was conceived after Abraham has attained the perfection signified by his name change and the circumcision. So we can see here that Isaac and his brother, half brother, I would say, Ishmael, has different characteristics. Ishmael was born when Abraham was still Abram. He hasn't attained that level of perfection. And we can see that Isaac was born when his name has been changed from Abram to Abraham, and is now being being circumcised. Ishmael was circumcised at the age of 13, while Isaac was circumcised at the right time that God has commanded on the 8th day. So we can also see that Ishmael is like a symbol of the past life of Abraham, while Isaac is a symbol of his attainment of righteousness by God. On the other hand, Esau and Jacob were twins, born of the same righteous mama, born of the same righteous mother, Rivkah, and raised in the same holy environment. They were raised in the same home. But what is the difference? Their father Isaac was a burnt offering without a blemish, who was circumcised on the 8th day of his life, and who never set foot outside of the Holy Land, unlike his father Abraham that went to go and sojourn in Egypt, in Israel. He had no idolatrous past and no pre-Isaac period in his life. So where did Esau's negative genes come from? That is the question. If two children were born of the same father, of the same mama, the father is a righteous man, the mama is she's a righteous woman, how come one has a negative genes and evil genes and the other one is good? They are raised in the same home. It's not that they are raised, one is raised in the north and the other one raised in the south, or one is raised in the west and the other one raised in the east. In the same home, under the same roof, they were all raised by the same mama, the same papa. How come one is evil and the other one is good? Even more puzzling is the fact that Esau's rejection seemed predestined from the womb. That is the more puzzling one, that his rejection by God has been from the womb. Because we remember when the mama went to go and inquire of God, they said 2 nations and 2 regimes are in your womb. The older one shall serve the younger one. It is being predestined by God. For those who doesn't believe in predestination, those who are watching online, this is what God is telling you. There is predestination. If Esau had turned bad later in life, we might attribute this to the fact that every man is given absolute freedom of choice to be accepted or rejected. But how are we to explain Esau's gravitation to evil even before he was born? They were both holy in the womb. They have not seen the light of the day. They have not committed any crime. They have not committed any sin. But still, one is called and the other one is rejected. As it is said in the Messianic writing, who are we to say God is unrighteous? Who are we to say, oh God, it is your fault. You caused it because you rejected me. So therefore I turn this way. Or because you show favor on this one, that is why it's like this. Who are you to reject? Or who are you to complain? Shaul said, the potter has the right to do whatever I want to do with his pot or with his mortar, with his clay. If you like, he might make a vessel unto honor, and if you like, he might make a vessel to dishonor. It's his choice. He can do whatever he wants. He might have mercy, as it is written. He can have mercy to whom he wants to have mercy, and he can be unpleased with whom he wants to be unpleased. That is God. He is God. We cannot complain. He is the creator. He has power over all. Sibling rivalry is the name of the game. In fact, the entire book of Bereshit can be described as a narrative of sibling rivalry. We have Cain and Abel, Abraham and his nephew Lot, Ishmael and Isaac, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brother. It is as though the Torah wishes to inform and impress upon us the true nature of human being. The Torah is telling us who we are as a person, who we are as a human being, our true nature. Our true nature is always about competitiveness. The Torah is full of all these examples from the beginning. We have Cain and Abel. We have, in some Midrashim, it is said that Cain and Abel are twins, just like Jacob and Esau. And Abel was called. Cain rejected, because Abel did what is right in the sight of God. We have Abraham and his nephew Lot. We have Ishmael and Isaac. We have Jacob and Esau. We have Joseph and his brothers. We are by nature competitive creatures, and the competition always begins at home and with those who are close to us. We should not think of our children as being angelic, but rather deal with their true nature and recognize the pitfalls that natural sibling rivalry will always endanger. We should understand that children are competitive. Children, they fight and quarrel among one another every time, even though they are born of the same father and the same mother. Everybody wants to show who is senior. Everyone wants to show who is more powerful. Everyone wants to show who is the one that is more acceptable and who is one not acceptable. It is about competition and rivalry at home. But it says, as a parent, our job as parent is to guide our children on the right path. Every child is a different world, and no two children are the same. Even identical twins are not the same. Because of this, or because of this fact of human nature, competitiveness is built into the structure of all children. It is the task of an education and the home to channel the competitiveness into positive behavior and creative idea. It is the task of the mama. It is the task of the father to channel this energy into a healthy environment, into a positive behavior, not a negative one. So, as parents, we have a lot of work, a lot of job to do. You don't just look at, there's children, it doesn't matter. Oh, he did something that is bad. Oh, they're children. Oh, he's going to grow up over it. No. You have to start to train them now when they are young. Because as it said that a fish cannot be burned when the fish is already dry. You can only burn the fish when the fish is still wet. When it's still fresh, that's when you can bend it. You cannot bend the fish when it's already dry. If you want to bend it when it's dry, you are going to break it. So that is what it is all about. If we as parents, if we don't train our children in the path of justice, in the path of the Torah, when they grow up, you cannot come and say you want to impart the way of the Torah in their life. No, it is too late. So we have to do that, and we have to channel their energy, their competitiveness, their rivalry in a positive behavior, not a negative one. This is what the rabbi meant by the statement that the competitiveness between scholars and wise men is a method for increasing wisdom and understanding generally. Without competitiveness, there can be very little creativity or advancement in all forms of life. Technology, healthcare, finance, politics, and human nature. The task is to direct this competitiveness toward positive aim and to limit it so that it does not descend into violence and tyranny. So our job, as the rabbi said, is that competitiveness is very good. We have a positive greed and we have a negative greed. That's what he's saying here. Competitiveness is nice, is good. When we channel this competitiveness in the right positive way, not a negative one, not to cause destruction, not to be violent, against or among ourselves because we are in competition, no, or to be a tyrann, no, to be a dictator, no, but for a competitiveness, a healthy environment should be able to bring about competition. When somebody wants to be the sole owner of the entire planet, there is a problem here. I know about a particular group of people. They have technology, they have idea, they have understanding, but their lack of advancement, their lack of competition makes the technology and their advancement to still be at the stone age. And that is where the problem is, because there is no competition. But if there is competition, you can advance in all these ways, in technology, in healthcare, in finance, in politics, and in human nature, because we can grow up. Because this one is doing this, oh, I want to do more better. Oh, this one is, oh, I want to do more better. So that's how we increase in knowledge and in understanding. Part of the problem with Esau is not competitiveness, but rather insecurity. The problem of Esau, the brother of Jacob, is not about competitiveness, but his problem is insecurity. He always feels his younger brother tackling him at his feet. He's always thinking that his brother is always holding him at his feet or at his heel and preventing him from achieving the greatness that he feels he is due. Because of this insecurity, he seeks fame and fortune in opposing the idea and the lifestyle of his own very family. Okay, because my brother is accepted, or my mama show favor to my brother, I'm going to disobey. I'm going to go and marry the Canaanite, which my father said don't marry. I will go and start doing bad things because I know this will vex my papa or my mama because they refuse to love me like they love my brothers. Because my mama did the way he showed favor to my brother. Because my mama did not teach me the way he taught my brothers. So whose fault? Maybe if you have listened to your mama the way your brothers listen to your mama, maybe your mama will have loved you. If you don't, if your mama says sit and you stand up, if your mama says stay at home and help me in the home, you said no, I want to go and play with my friend. If your mama said okay, go and study, you said no, I want to go and watch a movie. Your mama said go and do this, you said no, I want to watch a game. Then how can your mama love you while the other one is doing exactly what the mama is saying? So whose fault? My fault or the mama's fault? No, it is your own fault because you refuse to listen to your mama. Because of this insecurity, as I said, he seeks fame and fortune in opposing the idea and the lifestyle of his own very family. He scorns his birthright because he feels that fulfilling his demands will only inhabit him. He feels that only by being different from Jacob can he achieve permanent respect in the face of his parents. It seems that I have to be by all means different from everybody for me to be accepted, for me to be respected, for my mama to reason and come to my own understanding. Because I think my mama does not understand. because I think I am older than my mama. Because my mama is an old cargo. My mama is what? Is old fashioned. This is the 21st century. Mama, don't you understand? Papa, don't you understand that this is not the way it is done? This is the 21st century. Everybody can do whatever they want. This is democracy. You can be demonstrating madness. A man or a woman will be going on completely naked on the street. They deliberately take their clothes and they tear it, saying that this is fashion. What type of fashion is that? Now you go naked. You say, Mama, and the mama will tell, so this is not right. No, Mama, you are what old fashioned. In your own days, this is no. You see, that is the problem. You want to say, Mama, during your time, there is no this and there is no that. But your mama knows life more than you. No matter how intelligent, no matter how smart you are, no matter how many degrees that you have in your life, your mama was born before you. But your mama knows what is nature rather better than you. So it is better for us, for the children, to listen to their parents. As all his plans crumbled, he cried out in anguish to his father that he wants the blessing that Jacob has received. He realized that only in those blessings which he will have to share always with Jacob can his destiny truly be fulfilled. He now realized later in life, as many children of nowadays always realize in life, that my mama was right. My papa was right. But when they were young, no. Papa wasn't right, mama wasn't right. Mama and papa are old-fashioned. But when they grow up in life, after it is too late, they now say, mama and papa were right. So the same thing happens in afterlife. The same thing happened to Esau. Now crying, asking his papa to bless him, when he went opposite the will of his parents. In this week's parasha, Isaac planned to bless his son Esau. Many commentaries ask why Isaac wanted to do that. When Isaac himself know that the blessing has to go to Jacob. Isaac wasn't a stupid man. He knew that the chosen one by God is Jacob, not Esau. But why did Jacob, or why did Isaac decided to bless Esau? Let's see. Rabbi Yaakov Kranz explained with a parable. A rich man has two sons, one virtuous and the other evil. The man owned a large plot of land that was fitting site for a great estate. Before his death, he gave his land to the evil son, to the rejected son, along with a large sum of money. But the virtuous son, the righteous son, was very shocked. He wondered, why did my wicked brother find such favor in our father's eyes? When I receive nothing, when I am the one that keeps his commandment, when I am the one that obeys him every time, and at the end of his life, he gave all his resources, all his blessings, all his money, everything, all the inheritance to my brother who is wicked, who never obeys, who never listens. What is going on here? What did I do wrong? Meanwhile, the wicked son built a large mansion on the land, on the properties of his father. Shortly afterward, however, he died prematurely, leaving everything he had built on his behind for his righteous brothers. The virtuous son now saw things in a different angle. The righteous son now saw things in a different perspective. What would I have built had our father given me what he gave to my brothers? He asked himself that question. What would I have built if my father has given me all this property? I would have contented myself with a simple house, if enough to satisfy my basic need and no more. Now I see that my father did me a big favor, for I will enjoy what my brother prepared with no effort at all on my part. A wicked son who inherited all the property of his father built a mansion, a big house, and he died prematurely. The question would have been, why did he die prematurely? He died prematurely because he did not obey the way of his father. He must have gone to step on someone's toe. He must have gone to do some evil, something bad, that he faced the consequence. Then at the end, the righteous son took control of all the properties, and he sees things in a different angle. This is a thing that he never worked for. Everything is already prepared, and he just came in and took it. Similarly concluded the rabbi, Adonai wants the virtuous to enjoy the benefit of this world. The Holy One, blessed be He, wants the righteous people to enjoy the benefit of this physical world. But He does not want them to waste their time pursuing worldly pleasure. Understand there is differences. God wants us to enjoy physical blessing, but He doesn't want us to take our entire time pursuing physical blessing. As Yeshua HaMashiach said, that seek ye the kingdom of God and all His righteousness, and after all these shall be added unto you. Without no effort, without no struggling, God will add all the benefits, all the blessing of the physical world unto you. Only when you seek Him first. When we put God first in our life, all other things, every other thing, material blessing, financial blessing, mental blessing, financial blessing, everything, children, everything will be added unto us, because we seek first His kingdom. We are not seeking after our own kingdom. We are not running helter-skelter seeking our own physical righteousness or physical blessing, materialism. No, because we seek first His kingdom, and every other thing will be given unto us. This was Isaac's intention as well, and it is the reason he wanted to bless Esau, not Jacob. In this case, however, Adonai did want Jacob to receive the blessing of this world directly. Therefore, he engineered the event described in our parasha, by which Jacob obtained the blessing from Esau, his brother. In Romans chapter 9, verse 11 to 14, Rabbi Shaul said, it is all about calling. It is all about the selection of God. It is all about the choice of God. It doesn't depend on us at all. It is God that chooses. It is the calling of the Holy One. If God has called you into His kingdom, if you are already be predestined to the kingdom of God, sure 100%, you will end up there. Even though if you have been doing something that is wrong, at the end, God will call you and you are going to see His voice, listen to His voice, and come into the kingdom. It is God that called. It is God that elect. It is God that select. It is God that choose. The voice is Jacob, but the hand are Esau. Bereshit chapter 27, verse 22. The voice is Jacob, but the hand is Esau. What does that mean? As long as the voice of Jacob's descendant is heard studying the Torah, the hand will not be the hand of Esau. Esau's descendant, the Roman Empire, which destroyed the Beth Hamikdash, will not have power over the Israelites. Many acts in the quoted verse, Jacob's voice and Esau's hand at the same time, not as alternative. How then can the Gemara interpret them as alternatives? It is quoted as explained by the Gemara is reading the verse as follows. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hand of Jacob are Esau's hands. When the might, which otherwise would be Esau, will be Jacob instead. That means the military might of Esau will be given unto Jacob. In this way, both halves of the verse will be fulfilled simultaneously. That is Devarei Eliyahu. On a deeper level, says the rabbi, Rashi is addressing the question, how does an Esau come to be a descendant of Isaac and Rebekah? How do two perfectly accepted individuals produce an offspring who is evil from birth, or rather rejected from birth? So Rashi tells us the generation of Isaac are Jacob and Esau, who are mentioned in the parasha. The rejected Esau, we know, is not a product of Isaac, but the result of Esau's own failure to overpower his negative inclination. Most of us, we always put fault on our parents. Yeah, I did it because it is the fault of my mama. This is because of the fault of my papa. No, it is not the fault of your mama or the fault of your papa. It is your own fault. A man must always be born twice, not once. Every human being must be born twice. The first is the one that when you are born physically, when your mama give birth to you, and the second birth is when you reborn yourself. You cannot put all the blame on mama or papa. You have to reborn yourself with your own self. You have to overpower the negative inclination that everybody had. Jacob has his own negative inclination, but he overcame it. He didn't complain and abuse or put all the fault on his parents' head. Unlike Esau, who refused to overcome his negative inclination. Then Esau of the parasha. Esau, as viewed from the perspective of the Torah, where everything, it seems, in its innermost and truest light. It is not evil, but the instrument to conquer all evil. The Esau of the parasha is a purveyor of the second delight and an indispensable element of the purpose of life on earth. In this also lies the deeper meaning of the parasha of the midrash that describe Jacob and Esau fighting in the womb over the inheritance of the two worlds. We have the physical world, the material world, and the spiritual world. Over the inheritance of these two worlds, the material world and the world to come, the spiritual one. This will seem to be one area in which they will have no quarrel. The Esau, we knew, desired the materialism of the physical world and shunned everything that is godly and spiritual, while the reverse is true of Jacob. So what were they fighting over? Explain the rabbis. The world to come is not a reality that is disconnected from our present existence. Rather, it is the result of our present day effort in dealing and perfecting the material world. I repeat, the world to come is not a reality that is disconnected from our present existence. Rather, it is the result of our present day effort in dealing with and perfecting the material world. The word of the Messiah is the culmination of all positive achievement of history, the era in which the cosmic yield of humankind, every good deed will come to light. The world to come starts from here, from this present world. It's not that it's not a magic, boom, and you're not in the world to come. No. The world to come, every start from this physical material world. If all the good things that you have done will be revealed in the world to come, if all the negative things that you have done in this material world will be revealed in the world to come. So both of them are simultaneous. All of them are holistic. They are both holistic, because if you do what is negative in this material world, you have no place in the world to come. If you do everything positive in this physical world, then you have a place in the world to come. If we keep the Torah, if we keep the justice, if we keep mercy, if we do kindness, if we do everything that is right, then we know for sure that the world to come is ours. But if we do everything opposite of the Torah, then we have no place in the world to come. In other words, our present world is the mean, and the world to come is the goal. In other words, I repeat, our present world, which is the material world, which is the physical world that we are now, is the means, while the world to come is the goal. The goal for us is to reach the world to come, and we have to pass through the physical world to reach the world that is coming. It's not that just jump and go to the world to come without passing the physical world. It doesn't work that way. You have to pass through this physical one to get to the one that is coming. This is the deepest significance of Jacob and Esau, and here we speak of the Torah of Esau, the accepted conqueror of his inclination. Preference for the present world. Jacob sees perfection on the only desirable state of man, while Esau sees the struggle with imperfection as desirable in and of itself. The desirable of the state of man, Jacob sees as perfection. We have to perfect it. We have to continue to perfect man. We have to continue to grow in understanding, in wisdom, in the learning of the Torah. While Esau saw it in a different perspective, from a different angle, thinking everything is all about imperfection. The struggle, the fight of itself is about competition, and fight and fight and fight from the negative point of view. Yet, both Jacob and Esau recognized the necessity for both of these two worlds, for the process and its outcome. The perfectly pious man also requires the material world as a vehicle that leads to ultimate perfection. And the conqueror also sees perfection as the goal to which his effort leads. For although his purpose in life is defined by the process itself, a process by definition must have a goal. So therefore, what I'm saying here is that the righteous man needs material things to achieve his mean. As it is written that Yeshua said, give what is Caesar, Caesar, and what is God, God. We need material things to make things perfect in this physical world. You can't say, okay, you see that you don't want to work. You say, okay, God will give me a manna. That won't work. You have to stand up every morning, go to work, and God will bless you. And that material money, you can save, you can buy a house, buy a car, live a good life. You can come, you pay your tithe, you pay, you encourage the people in the synagogue. You come and you do what is good. You do hesed. You can come and you become more. You can do more hospitality. You can, help the poor. But if you are poor yourself, how can you help the poor? That is the question. You can give only what you have. You cannot give what you don't have. So, therefore, the righteous man also needs material things to survive in this material world, because understanding that we are in the material world, we also need it. So, we have to do what is right. Why the conqueror, those people that think that materialism is everything and all, No, it's that for them they should see that all their effort, you should see that all your effort in attaining material blessing is leading, is to help you to gain the world to come. Many people think that the effort in gaining materialism here on earth is only for them to consume it upon themselves. That is where the problem is. But if you see it from another perspective, from another angle, that the materialism that you acquire into this world is to help you to reach the world to come, then your life will be completely different. Like the life of our forefather Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham acquired mass blessing, a lot of material things, a lot of material blessing, the Torah said, but he channeled these material things into the way of righteousness to help the poor to become more hospitable, to deliver those that are in captive, as he went and delivered and saved his nephew Lot. So if Abraham doesn't have the means, he cannot go and fight because he doesn't have the means. But because Abraham had the means, he went and faced those 4 kings and he captured them by the power of the Almighty, and he won. So therefore, material things is also good for you. But from what perspective or from what angle are you looking at it from? Is it from the angle of self-righteousness, self-consumption, only for yourself alone and your family, or to help others? That is where you have to decide. So this is their fight. Jacob and Esau each lay claim to both worlds as part of their life's endeavor. But their priority are reversed. To the Jacobs of the world, the material world is but a tool, a means to an end. To it Esau, man's material involvement and the struggle they entail are what life is all about. A futuristic vision of perfection is necessary, but only as a reference point that provides coherence and direction to the real business of life. The tension between them over their different vision or differing vision of the two worlds is not a negative thing. It is a result of two world view, both positive and necessary, both indispensable component of man's mission in life. What is your mission? Your mission is to consume all your resources upon yourself, or your mission is to perfect this material world. What is necessary? Our goal is to reach the world to come, but the means to reach the world to come is this material world, is this physical world. We cannot detach ourselves from the material world or from the physical world and think that the physical world will, by a miracle, become just. No. We cannot say, okay, you know what? I don't want to partake in politics. Then I'm going to pray that God will give me a righteous king or a righteous leader. That will never work. The children of God have to partake in politics. They have to be the leader, just as Joseph. The Torah said, when the righteous are on the throne, the people will rejoice, the people are happy. But when the wicked are on the throne, the people suffer. If the righteous did not partake in politics, how can you reach the aim? How can you occupy that seat? If we all draw back and say, you know what, it is a material world, then the evil people will continue to rule and the evil things will continue to happen. And then they will continue to enact laws that favor the evil people. The majority are silent and the minority are the one that is making noise. They will tell you, okay, everybody has to accept this. If you don't like it, that is the law. Because we, the righteous, are silent. The majority are keeping silent and their mouth is shut. They say, okay, I will pray. That doesn't work. We have to stand up and do the right thing. And the right thing is by taking part in everyday activities, in politics, in other areas of life, in business, in finance. So that we can tell them that all these things, we can channel it in the path of righteousness. If the evil people are the one controlling all the banks, of course they consume all the money upon themselves alone, they don't care about you or me. But if the righteous people are the one in control, then the things will change. We can perfect this physical world. We can make it just as the Holy One, blessed be He, intended it to be. I know it's a big journey, it's a big fight, but we can do it. If we begin to not to be a laid-back man, but we stand up and say, this is our right, and we have to make it right. We have to do it the way of the living God. We don't have to just close our eyes, our mind, and say, you know what? That is for the bad people. Politics is for the bad people. Let them continue. They continue to rule over you and continue to enact bad things. Don't complain. Don't come and say, oh, that man did this. The Lord they enact. Of course, because you did not take part. They will only be doing what is evil, what their master, the devil, is telling them. But when the righteous are on the throne, then we will do the bid of the living God. And the people will rejoice. Parasha Todot. So this parasha is very interesting. It's all seeing the two different worlds. The spiritual one and the material one. But understanding that for us to attain the spiritual one, we need to pass through the material one. We need to pass through the physical one. The end game is the spiritual one. But we need a means to reach there. And the means is through the physical one. Shabbat Shalom.
So we can go eat. I mean,